To get started on this first part of the project, you should have downloaded the Caricature reference photographs and picked out one of the previously unused photographs that we didn't use in either one of this unit's exercises. With it open, let's go into Photoshop and create a new document. File and New. In this document, the size and setup is going to be a 10 by 10 inch area. Make sure you're working in 300 resolution. We don't need any new artboards, and we're going to work in RGB color mode. And for now, we can keep our background just as a solid white. We'll say Create, and this will give us our document that we want to work in. I'm going to place my layers back where they need to be. The first thing we need to do is to import our image that we want to use. So let's go up to File, down to Place Embedded, and locate the character or picture. In my case, it'll be number 3, but yours can be something different. The process will be the same. With it placed in there, let's scale it up till the image of the head kind of fills it out nicely. So click and drag on the edges. The main thing I want to see is the person. That done, we hit return to lock it in. And before we can make any edits to the face and turn her into a caricature, let's go to our layers panel. I'm going to click on the layer and drag it down to a new layer. So this will quickly make a copy of the layer that I have selected. And we want to rasterize this smart object layer. So with that layer selected, let's go up to your layer drop-down menu. Choose Smart Objects, go down to the very bottom and choose Rasterize. This will turn this layer into a solid regular layer. Next, we can turn this, or begin cutting this apart so that we can turn it into our caricature. I'm going to go down to my Layers panel and I'm going to turn off my original portrait that I have. We only want to work on our base new copy that was created. Remember, we want to also select each major portion of this face. The more parts of the face that you have, the better the outcome or the results that you may tend to get. You don't have to use every single part, but it's always good to have those options. The main tool that I'm going to be using is going to be my regular Lasso tool. With the Lasso tool selected, make sure you're working in normal new mode, and also set your feather somewhere between 10 and 15 pixels. This will give it a nice soft edge selection, which is good for doing transitions and blending of the different objects that we have. Now we can go in and take this one part at a time. Do make sure when you make your copies and paste or cut and paste that you're cutting it away from this original copy layer. So for instance, if I wanted to select the eye, I need to select more than is necessary for the eye. So I'm going to click and drag around this area. I've gotten all of that. We'll then go up to Edit and Copy, or Command C, and then with it still selected, you can go up to Edit and Paste, and that will paste a copy of it directly on top of here. Do get into a habit of labeling each part, so this will be the right eye. Then reselect your original character layer, and let's select the other eye. So with this one, again, try to get more than is necessary. Whoops. Make it easier to blend in, because you can always erase this away. With it selected, Command C to copy, and then Command V to paste. That'll give us our new layer, and we'll call this our left eye. And then reselect this layer. Repeat this process for each part of the face that you're working on. We need a nose, a mouth. If they have any facial hair, you can get the beard and the chin. If they've got ears easily visible, do the ears. Do the hair, do the forehead, and also don't forget about the eyebrows as well. All parts of the face need to be completed and finished in order to create this caricature. Alright, with that done, I can now turn off that layer, and you can see how everything has its own individual layer, and I can turn on and off visibility of all those. As a matter of fact, let's go to our Layers panel, and let's turn off visibility for all of those layers by clicking on the little eyeball. And let's turn on visibility for that copy that we created. With this copy, we need to make one more selection and give ourselves a blank, weird face to be able to work from. Alright, so with that layer selected, again, we'll go with our Lasso tool and select out just the face. You can always get more than you need for the face. That's okay if you go outside the lines. If you need to add on, you can hold down the Shift key. You can add on a little bit more. Alright, we'll make a copy of that. Command C, Command V. I'm going to rename this my base layer. And we can turn off visibility for this. Now comes the really weird part where we have to remove all of the facial features and turn this into almost a blank mask. The tools that I like to use to do this are the little photo editing tools. The spot healing, and patch tool tend to work out really good. Remember, with the spot healing tool, all I've got to do is be able to go in one area and click and drag over that area. So for instance, something like the eyebrow, and when I let go, you can see how it will try to fill it in with the pixels or the parts of the image that's around it. Now sometimes this works better than others. Let's see if it'll work over here. And so that actually worked out pretty good, but sometimes it gives you some difficult artifacts that you have to go in and keep re-editing. This especially works well, or it doesn't work very well, if you have a larger area like the eye. If you have a larger area, this is where I like to use the patch tool. And with the patch tool selected up at the very top, do make sure you're working in normal mode, selection mode, and have the source selected for this one. With this, now I can go in and select the eyeball. When I click and drag, I want to try to find some area or patch of skin that kind of matches the area that's in there. When I let go, it'll blend it in and give me a little bit better results. Now I may need to go in and make another selection if I think there's some part that's a little bit too pronounced. And let it blend in with this. But what we want to do is to make it look like there's just a hollow area that can fit any other part into it. Again, it's going to start to look weird, but this is all part of the process. Again, make a selection of the eye, click and drag over to an open area of skin, and let the computer blend in all the parts. Then if you need to, make other selections to blend in those parts as well. You can do the lower part of the nose, select it. If it's selected, click and drag, and I think that part right there will work out. The main thing is I don't want to see any major transformations. And finally, let's do the mouth. Now for me, I do want to keep the cheeks and I do want to keep the forehead as part of it. Mainly I'm getting rid of the eyes simply because this will make it easier to blend in any other parts as well. With this done, now we can go in with the Liquify filter and start to warp and change out our face to give it more caricature-like features. I'm going to zoom out so I can see the entire thing. Let's go up to Filter, down to Liquify, and this will open up the little Liquify sub-program. From here, the three main tools that I like to use, it will be the push or the forward warp. I also like to use pucker and bloat depending on what I want to do with the different parts. For instance, if I needed to make the forehead a little bit larger, I'm going to choose the push. And I can go over to my tool options and change out the size and the pressure, the amount that I want to change things around. Remember, you want to be a little bit subtle in the movements that you create, so don't feel like you have to be very dramatic and push everything around to make it look overly liquefied. We simply want to exaggerate certain features and under-exaggerate other features. For mine, maybe I want her cheeks to be a little bit more squared off, so I'm going to bring these out. I'm going to give her kind of a smaller chin. And we'll push in, yeah. I'm going to use the bloat tool to make her cheeks a little bit larger. Clicking on it, you can see it slowly builds it up. And let's make her chin. I'm going to bring it down. Be more pointed. As far as her eyes, I'm going to make them a little bit smaller, so I'll use the pucker tool. Make that tool a little bit larger. Ooh, way too large. And I can click on the eyes, and you can see how this will bring in and narrow in those eye sockets. This is the kind of thing just to play around to see what kind of results that you get until you get something that you feel looks good and works well with your overall design. With that done, we'll say OK. This will give us our new facial features to start working with. Now, taking it one step at a time, we'll go in and start adding back all the features. The main tool that I'm going to use for this is going to be our Move tool, or our black arrow selection tool. I'm going to turn on Auto Select and make sure it's selecting the layer that I click on. And also, I want to quickly show my transform controls. This will allow me to know that I have it selected and also make any changes that I need on the fly. From here, we'll go into our Layers panel and take it one part at a time. Turn on visibility, in this case for the right eye. With that eye done, we can zoom in. You can see how it blends in really well because we use this, the faded or the feathered edge to it. From here, I can go in and use my transform tool. Let's scale it down to fit within the area. Place it right about there. We'll hit return to lock in the transformation. Let's do the same to the other eye. Turn on the left eye, select that layer. With that eye selected, we'll make her a little bit smaller to match. See how well that looks? That looks good, about the same. Maybe I'll select this one and make it a little bit bigger. Next, let's turn on the eyebrows. Those eyebrows, maybe I'll exaggerate these by making them a little bit larger. Place that on top. And if you see any areas that need to be cleaned up, like if you need to erase away or blend in this a little bit more, this is where we'll choose our eraser tool. The eraser tool works just like a brush. So with that, we'll give it a little bit larger and give it a very soft edge. So let your hardness be near 0. A little bit larger in my case. I've also dropped the opacity down between 10 and 20%. This way, whenever I erase, it will very subtly take several clicks, but it'll be very, very smooth blend and transition. Now keep in mind, this image isn't going to be our final image that we're going to do. We're actually going to paint over this and cartoonize it once we're finished. But this will be the starting point and the basis, so we want to get this looking as perfect as possible. Let's do the same now for our right eye. Again, grab your Move tool, go to your layer, and select the right brow. We'll move this in. We'll make this one a little bit larger too. Maybe scale it in to match that. I think that looks good. Hit return. That seems to actually blend pretty well for that, so I'm going to keep that. See what the nose would look like. Now for this nose, I actually want the nose to be a little bit larger too. So I'm going to make the nose larger. Bring it up. Now I can see my nose is underneath my eyes. So I'm going to go to my layer and click on it and drag it above each of the eye layer. Now that it's above all of the layers, I can move it around freely. You can see that it actually blends in a little bit better. Also, with this layer selected, maybe I want the nose to be a little bit larger too, or more bloated, more liquefied. So with that layer selected, I'll go back up to Filter. Don't choose the first Liquify, choose the second Liquify. And with that selected, I'm going to use my bloat tool, make my nose just a little bit bigger down towards the bottom. And I'm going to stretch it out at the top. Push it in a little bit more. I'll exaggerate that feature. With that done, we'll say OK. Now I've got my more bloated nose. Again, go in with your eraser tool, a little bit larger brush, but a very soft edge brush, and then clean up any edges that you need to blend in, make look better. So far so good. Moving on to the next one, grab your move tool. We'll do the mouth. With the mouth layer selected, you can see it's below everything, so I need to click and drag on it. For this one, I want to do a little bit of a warp and make her look like she's smiling a little bit more. So with it selected, we'll go up to Edit and Transform. And the kind of transform I want to do will be a warp transformation. This will give us our little mesh that we can then click on and drag it around. Let's see if we can move up the corners of the mouth to be more of a smile situation. There we go. Maybe push up these edges and push up this edge too. We'll say enter or check to return. I'm going to place this mouth just below, just within this area. I think that looks good. Now for mine, I have kind of a weird little artifact. I can see this part here and this part here are both the same thing. So I need to get rid of one or the other. I like this one, and this one's actually on my mouth layer, so I need to get rid of this part here. So I've selected my base layer, and this is where I can go in with my other tools, like my healing brush tool or my patch healing tool. And let's turn off visibility for my mouth for now, just so I can get it out of the way. So what I'm getting rid of is this part of the cheek, so that it can not be visible. So again, I'm working on my base layer. That layer selected, we'll highlight this, drag it over, and we'll just let it blend in. Now when I turn back on my mouth, you can see it's not as big of a deal. It actually kind of blends in well with this. Again, this won't be the final that we're creating. This is simply meant to be a starting point for what we're working on. I think that'll work well for what we're doing. Moving on. Next part is her ear. In my case, the ear needs to be a little bit larger, and we can rotate it and put it into place right about here. I'll actually have to warp that. So let's go up to Edit, Transform, and choose Warp. In my case, I need to bend it until it fits onto there. Let's do her hair. With her hair, we need to let it fit within this. I think that works well. Maybe make it a little bit smaller. And I actually broke her hair up into two different parts. So she's got some little tufts that are down here that can be reapplied, re-added back into here. So maybe I'll place one of those tufts to match her side cheek, and we'll do the third tuft underneath this ear down here. We'll make that a little bit larger and rotate it into place as well. I think that looks good for there. All right. With that done, we've now completed the major portion of creating this caricature. You've warped out everything, you've selected each of the individual parts. This is where you can take some time to look at your character and make sure everything looks correct with it. For instance, I can go in if need be and clean up the edge of my base just to see the outline of her cheeks. Maybe I'll do that. So I'm going to grab my eraser tool, set my opacity up to be a little bit larger, and then I'll go in, oops, let's also give myself a hard edge and clean up along here. All right. And I can turn back on my base portrait that I have as well. So I'm going to go in and also clean up the edge of this mouth. That way it blends in a little bit better with the cheek. I think that looks good too. There we go. All right, the last thing we can do is to flatten our image so that we get this down into one single layer. So in our layers panel, we'll go up to the options and down towards the bottom choose Flatten Image. This will take all of our layers and turn it into one single layer. It's going to ask if I want to discard any hidden or unused layers. We'll say OK to that. And let's save this now as our sketch image. So I'm going to call this my Ivy Caricature. And the format that we want to save this as will be a JPEG. The next step is to bring this into Illustrator and do the basic outline of it. I'm going to save mine on the desktop so I can find it. And we'll say OK to these options. Now I can launch Adobe Illustrator. Let's go up to File and create a new document. The size of this document is going to be the same as our Photoshop document. So set it to be 10 inches by 10 inches tall. We only need one artboard, and make sure you're working in RGB color mode. We'll say create to this. From here, let's go in and place our new image that we created by going to File and Place. Got mine saved on the desktop as a caricature, and make sure template is checked on when you hit place. This will create a new template layer that's below everything, or below your main tracing layer that we're going to work on. And I'm going to unlock it for now and double click on your layer to enter the layer options. We want to change the dimming amount from 50% to about 75% so that we can see it a little bit better. From there, we can now go back to our layers and lock it down and work on layer 1 to create our tracing. The tool that I like to use for this is going to be my pencil tool, but you can use your blob brush tool if you've got a Wacom tablet that's got pressure sensitivity. If you don't have a Wacom, this is where I would recommend using the pencil tool. Also, let me remind you how I set up my pencil tool if this is what you're using. If you double click on the pencil tool icon, this will bring up the options. Make sure the fidelity is set closer to smooth, maybe not all the way over, but about the 3/4 mark. Make sure Fill New Strokes is unchecked, as well as keeping and the options to toggle the smooth tool is also unchecked. Everything else can remain checked on. We can say OK to this. Also, I'm going to go over to my Appearances panel. Again, if you can't find the Appearance panel, you can go up to Window and choose Appearances from here. Inside of the Appearances panel, click on the options and make sure New Art has Basic Appearance is unchecked the way this is. This way, whatever pencil tool or whatever settings that you have for your pencil tool will remain the same regardless as you keep drawing. You can close that out now. And with my pencil tool selected, I'm going to choose a stroke color of red so I can see it, and also a fill color, we'll set that to be none. This way, when I start to draw with my pencil, whoa, It'll look like this. Finally, I'll change my profile from a uniform to that width profile number 1, and I can change it up later if I want, and it gives me a good thick and thin line that looks like it's pressure sensitive. What I want to do at this stage is to create a line art tracing of all her key features. So to get started, we'll zoom in. Let's test out the size of this brush. I think that looks okay. Maybe make it a little bit larger. Just remember to only use lines for this entire process. Later on, we're going to bring this into Photoshop and then add in all the tones and shadows and other details as well. Once you've got something that you like, in my case I need to turn all of these red lines back into black lines so that I can see them. So with my selection tool, I can go up to select, we'll do all. This will get all of our red lines. And since they were the same color, I should be able to choose my fill color and then choose black from there. With this done, let's go up to edit. I want to copy everything that's on here. So make sure everything is unlocked and copied. Let's jump back into Photoshop. And with our image, our JPEG image already selected, let's go up to Edit and Paste. Now this is going to bring in the vector objects into a rasterized environment of Photoshop. So it's going to ask you, how do you want to bring this in? We're going to paste these down as just regular pixels. So when we say OK, this will create its own individual layer. But before we lock it down, let's go ahead and move it into position and get it lined up as best as possible with our original image. You may need to scale it, you may need to move it around. In my case, mine's coming in right where it needs to be, simply because I have everything the same size as in Illustrator. With that done, we can hit the checkbox, and this will set up our original outline layer. Let's go to our Layers panel. I'll call this the outline. In the next part, we can go in and start creating our tones and all the details for the rest of our image. Before we do that, let's save this up as a Photoshop document. We'll go up to File. Let's do a Save As. From here, you can still call it your caricature, but make sure the format is set to Photoshop so it gives you all of your layers. We'll hit Save and say OK to the options.